It happened on a cold October afternoon in 1978, inside a quiet dojo in South Bay, Los Angeles. The air was crisp, golden light slanting through paper windows, and on the mats, a dozen students sat in perfect semicircle. Their teacher that day, Joe Louis. The undefeated American karate champion, the man who could drop opponents with a single, explosive kick. The legend who'd trained alongside Bruce Lee himself. Louis stood tall, his black belt slightly frayed, proof of a life spent in the ring. At 34, he was at his peak, muscle, precision, and confidence. He looked at his students and said in that calm but commanding voice, "Real fighting isn't about flash. It's about efficiency, power, and speed." His students nodded, hanging on every word. Then one of them, young, curious, maybe too brave for his age, raised his hand. "Sensei, what about Bruce Lee's one-inch punch? His trapping moves? The flow you see in his films?" Joe paused. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, with a smirk, he waved the question away. "Listen, Bruce was a good friend, but let's be honest, that stuff looks good on camera. Real fights aren't poetry. They're pressure, they're pain, they're speed." He started pacing, demonstrating the difference. Sharp, snappy movements, explosive strikes that cut through the air. All those Wing Chun traps, the intercepting fist, the philosophy, they look impressive, but in a real fight, a straight punch ends it faster. Some students nodded, others hesitated. Something in the room shifted, admiration mixed with unease. Because here was Joe Louis, the fighter who had trained with Bruce Lee, dismissing the very philosophy that had made Bruce a legend. And at that exact moment, fate decided to make things interesting. From the back of the dojo, the door slid open softly. Two men entered. One was a young writer named Rel, notebook in hand. The other, Chuck Norris. At 38, Norris carried himself differently. Calm, collected. He didn't need to prove anything. His silence had weight. His steps, deliberate. He stood in the shadows for a few seconds, listening to Joe's words echo through the hall, and those words cut deep. "Bruce was too slow for modern competition," Joe said. "Philosophy doesn't block punches." The students chuckled nervously. That's when Chuck stepped forward. His voice was steady, but his presence shifted the entire room. "Interesting perspective, Joe." The room froze, heads turned. Joe blinked, surprised, then broke into a grin. "Chuck Norris, didn't see you there." Chuck smiled faintly. "I heard you were teaching the kids about real fighting. Mind if I add something?" Joe's smile faltered just a little. "Your dojo, your rules, Chuck?" "Maybe, but we both know this isn't about rules," Norris said. "It's about truth." He turned toward the Abaisam students. His tone softened. "Bruce Lee wasn't about speed. He was about timing and intention. He taught me that being fast isn't about how quickly you move. It's about moving when it matters." Joe folded his arms, leaning back slightly. "Sounds poetic, Chuck, but poetry doesn't win fights." Norris looked him dead in the eye. "No, but precision does." And just like that, the tension became electric. Two men, two philosophies, speed versus flow, power versus awareness, Joe Louis versus Chuck Norris. No one knew it yet, but they were about to witness a lesson that would echo for decades, one that would redefine what it really means to be fast. Now, what happened next inside that dojo would leave even Joe Louis speechless, because Chuck didn't just talk about Bruce's philosophy, he proved it. In the next part, you'll see what really unfolded when two martial arts titans decided to test whose truth was stronger in a sparring match that became legend. Before we continue, tell me, whose approach do you think would dominate in real combat? The explosive power of Joe Louis or the effortless flow of Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee's philosophy? Comment your answer, and then we'll step back onto the mat. The mats had been cleared. The students' chatter had faded into silence. And in that silence, only two men remained standing. Joe Louis, the powerhouse. Chuck Norris, the calm storm. They weren't there to fight for pride. They were there to prove a point. Mike Stone, another world champion and mutual friend, stepped forward to referee. Light contact only, he reminded them. No gear, just control. Both nodded. Their eyes locked, years of friendship, rivalry, and unspoken respect hanging between them. Then Mike dropped his hand. Begin! Louis moved first, always did. In a blur, he launched forward, fists flashing, kicks slicing the air like whips. His legs were pistons, his combinations machine gun precise. Students gasped. They could barely track his movement. But here's the strange thing. Chuck Norris didn't move much at all. He didn't block in a frenzy or counter in panic. He simply shifted. A few inches here, a quiet pivot there. Every strike Joe threw missed by the width of a breath. Louis grinned mid-combo. "You're running away, Chuck." No reply, just the faintest smile. Then, as Louis stepped in again, one heartbeat too deep, Norris moved. Not fast. Right. He slid inside the attack, turned his hip, and with a tap to Louis's abdomen, followed by a whisper of contact to his temple, he froze the giant in place. It wasn't a knockout. It didn't need to be. Every martial artist in the room saw it instantly, that if Norris had chosen to, the fight would have ended right there. "Time," Mike called, voice steady but eyes wide. Silence. The first round was technically even, but everyone knew what they'd just witnessed wasn't. Louis stepped back, chest heaving slightly, eyes narrowing. "Not bad," he said, "but I was holding back." Norris nodded. "I know." Round two began. This time, Louis came in heavier, mixing karate with raw kickboxing aggression. His speed was breathtaking. He swept forward with hooks, low kicks, back fists, spinning strikes. He was pure momentum. But Norris wasn't playing defense anymore. He started flowing. Every grab Louis attempted turned into an opportunity. Every kick redirected, every punch deflected with minimal effort. It wasn't blocking, it was understanding. What Bruce Lee had called being like water was unfolding right there, and the dojo could feel it. Louis tried to clinch. Norris slipped through. Louis spun into his famous heel kick, and the entire crowd leaned in, knowing that move could end a professional bout. But when the kick came, Norris was gone. Not back. Around. He had stepped into the blind angle, following the motion itself. Louis completed the spin, only to find Norris behind him, calm, balanced, hand resting lightly, where a devastating strike could have landed. Mike Stone raised his hand. Point. Norris. The students erupted in murmurs. Some clapped, others whispered to each other. What they were seeing wasn't just technique, it was mastery. Louis stood there, chest rising and falling, processing. His mind, trained to calculate speed and strength, was struggling to compute what had just happened. He looked at Chuck and asked, "How are you doing that?" Norris took a slow breath. "By not fighting against you." Louis frowned. "Come again?" "You're fighting the way most people do, to prove something, to overpower, to dominate. Bruce taught me something different. He said, if you resist force with force, you waste energy, but if you flow with it, you control the outcome." The room went still again, because for the first time, Joe Louis, the undefeated champion, the man who once mocked philosophy, wasn't just hearing words. He was feeling them. Round 3 was about to begin, but it wasn't just another round. It was a turning point, a moment that would test everything Joe Louis believed about fighting, speed, and strength. Now the question wasn't who's faster, it was who understands. And in that final round, Chuck Norris would deliver the lesson that Bruce Lee had once given him. one that would forever change the way Joe Louis taught, fought, and remembered his old friend. The air in the dojo felt heavier now, not with tension, but with awareness. Every student knew they were no longer watching a sparring match. They were witnessing a truth being revealed. Joe Louis rolled his shoulders, trying to shake off the strange unease that had crept into his chest. He'd fought hundreds of men, bigger, faster, meaner. But this felt different. Across from him, Chuck Norris stood still, breathing calm, focus absolute. "Ready," Mike Stone called. Louis nodded. "Always?" Norris gave a single nod back. "Then let's learn." The third round began. Louis attacked again, but something inside him had changed. His moves were still powerful, still fast, but less certain. He wasn't just fighting Chuck anymore, he was fighting his own doubt. Norris didn't press an advantage. He waited, observed, flowed, and then, in one clean motion, the moment everyone remembered for years, Chuck intercepted. Louis threw a perfect punch, textbook power, perfect form. But before it even reached its target, Norris's body shifted like he already knew it was coming. He didn't block. He simply redirected the motion, one small, invisible pivot that sent Louis's arm offline and left him open. A second later, Chuck's palm hovered inches from Louis's chest, not striking, just there. Louis froze. The crowd did too. It was over. But Norris didn't declare victory. He stepped back and said quietly, "Joe, do you see it now?" Louis blinked, breathing hard. "See what?" "Speed isn't about moving fast," Norris said. "It's about moving right. Bruce taught me that." The words hit like a blade of light, not cutting flesh, but cutting through pride. Norris continued, turning toward the students. "Bruce used to say, 'The fastest strike is the one that never wastes motion.' He didn't care about showing power. He cared about understanding it. He taught that a fight is won long before a punch is thrown, in the timing, in the rhythm, in the mind." He glanced back at Joe. "You were faster than me, Joe, but how many of your strikes landed?" Louis thought back, eyes narrowing, his fists unclenched slowly. "None." "Exactly," Norris said, "because speed without awareness is noise, but awareness makes every movement count." The dojo was silent. Even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. Norris looked at his old friend, and his tone softened. "You said Bruce was too slow, but what if you just couldn't see his speed? What if his timing was so perfect that it looked slow, because he was already where you weren't?" Louis stared at him, that same defiance in his eyes, but now mixed with something else, understanding. "He was playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers," he murmured. Chuck nodded. "Exactly. Bruce wasn't fighting his opponents. He was reading them." A few students shifted, eyes wide. One of them whispered, "He's saying Bruce was predicting attacks before they happened." Norris heard him and smiled. "Not predicting, feeling. He once told me, when your mind is still, you can see the attack before it begins, because the opponent's intent always moves first." He let the words linger, and in that moment, even Joe Louis, the embodiment of raw, American fighting spirit, felt something stir inside, the realization that Bruce's speed was never in his muscles, it was in his mind. Louis lowered his guard completely. "Chuck, I think I owe that man an apology." Norris shook his head gently. "You don't owe him anything. Just remember what he stood for. He wanted all of us to evolve." That sentence hit deep, because behind it was truth. Bruce Lee never wanted disciples. He wanted thinkers, warriors who questioned, adapted, evolved. The sparring match was officially over, but something else had just begun. Joe Louis's transformation from fighter to teacher. He turned toward his students, voice steady, humble. "I told you earlier that power and speed win fights. I was wrong. Real mastery is understanding when not to fight, and when you do, to move with purpose, not ego. The students bowed their heads, silent. Chuck smiled faintly, eyes distant, remembering his old friend, the man who had once told him, "The perfect fighter is one without anger." Bruce Lee was gone, but his philosophy, his essence, had just been reborn in that room. The mats were still warm when the last echoes of movement faded. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Joe Louis, the man who'd once declared that speed ruled all, broke the silence. He stood in the center of the dojo, sweat still glistening on his brow, chest rising and falling, but his posture had changed, less defiant, more grounded. He looked at his students, young men and women who had just witnessed not just a sparring match, but an awakening. "Class," he began, his voice lower now, steady but humble. "I said earlier that real fighting was about speed, that Bruce Lee's techniques were just philosophy. I was wrong." The room stayed silent, every eye fixed on him. What Chuck just showed us, what Bruce tried to teach all along, is that martial arts isn't about who hits first or hardest. It's about understanding, awareness, the ability to read your opponent and yourself. He paused, scanning the room. "Each of you came here to learn how to fight. But if you leave here only knowing how to hit, then I've failed you. Real mastery isn't domination. It's harmony." His words carried something the students had never heard from him before: humility. Then he turned to Chuck. "You proved me wrong, my friend." Norris smiled softly. "No, Joe." "Bruce did?" Louis nodded, looking down for a moment. "Yeah, he always had a way of proving us wrong, didn't he?" They both chuckled, quietly, like two warriors remembering a comrade gone too soon. Rel, the young writer who had followed Norris that day, was scribbling furiously in her notebook, realizing she had just witnessed a moment of history. One that the martial arts world would never officially record, but would live in whispers and retellings. As the students bowed out, Louis called out one last time. "Before you go, remember this: speed fades, strength weakens, but understanding only grows. Bruce's legacy isn't about moves, it's about mindset. Carry that forward." One by one, they bowed and left, heads still buzzing with what they'd just seen. Soon, only the two men remained. Joe exhaled deeply, sitting on the edge of the mat. "You know, Chuck," he said, "I spent years chasing milliseconds, timing drills, explosive training, endless hours trying to be faster. But today I realized I was chasing the wrong thing." Chuck sat beside him. "You were chasing movement. Bruce was chasing meaning." Louis nodded. "And you caught it." Chuck shook his head gently. "We all do, eventually, if we're willing to slow down enough to see it." That line hung in the air. It wasn't something from a movie. It was real, the kind of truth you only arrive at after years of sweat, failure, and humility. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the mats. Two silhouettes side by side, united not by rivalry, but by respect. That day became a quiet legend in martial arts circles. Students who had been there would speak of it with reverence, calling it the day philosophy defeated speed. But for Joe Louis, it wasn't about defeat. It was about rebirth. In interviews years later, he would recall that moment, his voice softer, wiser. "I went to teach that day, but I left as a student. Chuck showed me that Bruce's philosophy wasn't theory. It was truth. I realized that even after his death, Bruce was still teaching us, through each other." Chuck, too, would mention it when asked about Bruce's legacy. "That afternoon reminded me why Bruce changed the world. He didn't just teach us how to fight, he taught us how to think." Rela's article would eventually appear in a small martial arts magazine, a modest piece titled "When Speed Met Stillness." It never made front-page news, but among those who truly understood the art, it became a story passed down from teacher to student. A timeless reminder that wisdom often arrives wearing the gloves of humility. And maybe, somewhere beyond that dojo, Bruce Lee himself would have smiled, not because his philosophy was defended, but because his message had finally been understood. Be water, my friend. Not faster, not stronger, just free. So now it's your turn. If you were in that dojo, would you rather fight with speed or flow? Would you rather strike first or understand first? Tell me in the comments. What do you believe matters more in real combat, speed or awareness? And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that real mastery is more than motion, then subscribe to Timeless Icon, where every legend teaches us not just how to fight, but how to live. Because the greatest battles are never fought in the ring. They're fought within.